It's Vekoma by 2. Network Effect is trying hard, but Vekoma is a colt with serious promise as he scores in the Nashua.
The three of them across the track. Tex on the inside. Our brain trust, not that Brady, fights on between those two. These three coming down to the line in the winners, and Tex does it. And here's Haikal making a late run on the extreme outside. They come for the finish. It is Haikal to win the Gotham.
Up on the outside, running is Outshine, now gaining ground and toward the rail is Lord Dragon. Down to the wire, it's Tacitus going to the front. Tacitus strikes to the lead. Tacitus to win the Tampa Bay Derby.
They're off in the Wood Memorial. And they're into the stretch, and here comes Tex and Tacitus, and the two of them are right together as they come to the 8th pole. Tacitus on the outside, Tex along the rail, Tacitus and Tex locked in battle at the 16th pole. It's Tacitus in front.
The Wood Memorial, of course, another one of the 3 Super Saturday preps for the Road to the Roses to the Kentucky Derby, was contested at Ozone Park in New York at Aqueduct Racetrack. $750,000 would have been $1 million if Mind Control, Grade 1 winner of the Hopeful Stakes, who had run very well in the Gotham after winning the Jerome on New Year's Day, would have entered. It would have been $1 million race, and Greg Sacco took him off the Triple Crown Trail, but had another horse in here named Jovia in here, along with Hoffa's Union, a horse who was getting a lot of buzz off of his one maiden, or his one race, winning by over 15 lengths at Laurel, making his second career start against Graded Company. He also had Over Deliver out of the Todd Pletcher barn, and then the top 2 finishers from the Tampa Bay Derby, Tacitus, trained by Bill Mott, a son of Tappet, who had, of course, beaten Outshine out of the Pletcher barn in that race in a stakes record winning time. Yeah, those 2 horses, along with Gotham winner Hakal, who had made that dramatic run to run down Mind Control, Instagram, and Much Better in what was a radioactive barbecue in the Gotham Stakes, and people were wondering if he could get the 2 turns or the added distance in this race. Some people considered him a closing sprinter. You had the Not That Brady, who also had performed poorly in the Gotham. Then you had the Withers winner, Tax, who skipped the Gotham, also bailed out of running in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. That was a consideration to freshen up for this race. This was his 3rd attempt out of 9 furlongs, ran a very credible 3rd, was overtaken in the last 50 to 100 yards or so of the Remsen Stakes behind Maximus Mischief and Network Effect. Then he won the Withers in a blanket finish with Our Brain Trust and Not That Brady, who I aforementioned ran poorly in the Gotham after that race. And then, of course, you had, as I said before, Tacitus in here. And in the end, what ended up happening was the beginning of the race was, pretty much the roughest part of the race, or it could be argued. Jovia initiated a lot of contact coming over from about the 10 to the 11 hole, and really, made it kind of a bit of a train wreck and a traffic jam and a cavalry charge at the first turn. Over Deliver was compromised by that. Tacitus was also had to be checked in the first turn. So there was a lot going on in the beginning of the race, but Not That Brady was able to avoid, this disaster and get to the lead, setting fractions of 23.62 for the quarter, 46.91 for the half, as Jovia and he went into a speed duel, and Tax was able to sit back about 7-8 lengths off the pace. So beneficial wise for him to sit off of it gave him the opportunity to have some kick in the stretch. So he sat back, and Tacitus did the same thing. And then on the turn, after 3 quarters in 111.46, this is where, as we all talk about, the real running began, as both Tax and Tacitus made their moves in this race on the turn. As I say in the description, Tax rated, he was about 8 off, made his bid on the turn, went about 3 or 4 wide, basically because those 2 spots, the inner spots, were being occupied by the front runners. And then he basically battled very, very hard in the stretch, ran the same way that he did in both the Remsen and the Withers. And of course, Tacitus was right there, making his move, making a very, very sustained run. As I said, he got bumped bumped. He was wide in the first turn. Had a rail trip, though, prior to making his move on Tax and the front runners. Went 5 wide, lugged in a little bit in the stretch, but he and Tax were both game, and Tacitus was able to prevail by 1 1/4 lengths, with Tax finishing second, 2 3/4 lengths in front of Hakal, who came on belatedly to get third, and Math Wizard, who ran a very, very nice race, picking up $50,000 in a 4th place finish from off the pace. So in the end, of course, as we look at the order of finish, Not That Brady was 5th. Final Jeopardy was a horse that people were talking about. 6th, Hoffa's Union, who was much talked about, but it's better to be proven than to be hyped, and he didn't run so well. 7th, Grump's Little Tots, another Jason Service horse, was 8th. Outshine, a horse that I had in the exotics or in my superfectas. I had him actually as a win bet. In as far as the Wood Memorial goes, I expected him to run very well. He finished a nondescript 9th, and then his stablemate Over Deliver was 10th. Jovia, the early pace setter, in tandem with Not That Brady, picked up the rear in 11th. So when looking at the final analysis of this Wood Memorial, Tacitus, there was an inquiry. It didn't have anything to do with the top 4. It had more to do with what happened in the beginning when Jovia came over on pretty much the whole field, wiped out everyone and put him into the bleachers at Aqueduct. But, in this race, he made a tremendous run to make up the stagger on the front runners, and Tax did the same thing. I really like this horse. I liked him coming in. I had him as one of my win bets, and I also had him in every one of my superfectas, my trifecta of superfectas that we touched on in the preview podcast. Very, very nice horse. He earns his way into the Derby. I think he's going to be very intriguing as to whether, this 4th race at 9 furlongs or above, he's run 3 times at the 9 furlongs. He'll get 10 furlongs and added ground in the Derby. It'll be very interesting to see if those tactics will be effective. Rating a little bit off the pace is going to be very interesting. Probably won't be sitting back as far in the Derby, but that circumstantially is yet to be determined based on the post positions and how these horses come out of the gate. But he's a horse that can be in the first flight. He can also sit back. It's going to all depend on how intuitive his rider is to the pace, and that applies to every jockey. But he ran a very nice race. The winner, I expected him to run well. He was my final pick in my superfecta. He was my actual top pick, along with Outshine, who disappointed, and we'll just find out the mystery as to why he didn't pick up his feet on this day. But Tacitus, really, really made a tremendous run. Showed some really nice speed in this race. A nice progression from being bottled on the inside, even though he got a good trip in the Tampa Bay Derby. And everybody loves his pedigree to go 1.25 miles. I certainly like his chances. I do think that he's going to have to be able to approximate that move that he made in the same way in the Derby. He's going to have to be steadily forwardly placed. It's going to be crucial to not necessarily get hung wide. A come from behind horse, being hung wide is not the the end all, but at the same time, you don't want to be too far wide in these races. You want to be able to work out the kind of trip that he got, which was on the inside, and then be forwardly making your move toward the leaders. And so we'll see if, based on the post position, if he'll show a little more tactical speed, because again, there'll be dead horses in the Derby that won't be picking up their feet, and by as a byproduct, without even hopefully making all of your efforts or using all of your gears, you can basically forwardly move up the chain in terms of improving your position. Then we'll find out on the turn if he can have the brilliance to make that run and crystallize that pedigree of his that everybody's talking about, which has also been very, very much discussed when it comes to Bourbon War. Even though he was a belated 4th in the Florida Derby, people think the pace didn't set up for him, that the added ground will help him. We'll talk a lot more about that and whether I think that's viable or legitimate in the days and the weeks coming up to the Derby. We're about 3.5, almost a little less than 4 weeks away from the Run for the Roses. But Tacitus was able to win this race in 151.23. That is not something that is going to make you sit and say, wow. It wasn't a wow performance from a time standpoint, and it some will look into whether the Aqueduct track was playing slow or not. But 151.23 is something you got to be a little worried about. You hope that horses will improve, because when you look at the final preps, that has to be the improvement. Tacitus is somewhere in the middle. Vacoma ran a slightly better time in the Bluegrass, and of course the Santa Anita Derby was in that 151 range as well. So these horses are going to have to make the progression these trainers and people who are handicapping these horses have to make. But a very, very nice performance. Again, Hakal in finishing third. he was off the pace and was really out of contact with the top two, and even to some degree Tax and Tacitus. He did get the rail skimming trip. He made a wide bid, and that's only because, like with Tax and Tacitus, you know, the inside part of the track was occupied by those front runners. And then he drifted a little bit in spots in the stretch, closed evenly. He was third best. He was able to pick up the minor winnings or the minor placings to get ahead of Math Wizard in the last 100 yards. Not a tremendously, not a great performance, but, you know, he does have, I think in totality, he's got about 70 points. So he's a horse that has enough points to get into the Kentucky Derby, and Kieran McLaughlin is going to have to evaluate whether he believes his horse will like the added distance and would be able to make a big run at 1.25 miles. He didn't quite have the punch that he did in the Gotham. That's to be expected on some level because of the added distance, whereas Tacitus showed a little more speed. But with that slow time, I think every trainer believes they may have a shot here or it's going to be a war of attrition. I just hope my horse is, you know, standing at the end. But either way, Tacitus gives Bill Mott his first Wood Memorial victory, winning by 1 1/4 lengths over Tax, with Hakal third and Math Wizard fourth. Tacitus, the winner of the 2019 Wood Memorial.
The road to the Kentucky Derby continues. Another major Kentucky Derby prep race, this time New York's significant race, the Wood Memorial.
Danny Gargan riding the Dream, Tax representing his first hope and his first try at Triple Crown. Or he would earn a spot in the starting gate if Tax wins from the rail.
They're off in the Wood Memorial. Not that Brady has put away Jovia, but here come Tax and Tacitus with their runs. 3/4 in 111.46, and they're into the stretch. And here comes Tax and Tacitus, and the two of them are right together as they come to the 8th pole. Long shot Math Wizard has run a big one. He's third to the outside. Tacitus on the outside. Tax along the rail. Tacitus and Tax locked in battle at the 16th pole. It's Tacitus in front. Tax second on the inside as they come down to the line. Hightoll takes third late. It is Tacitus in the Wood Memorial. Tax was second. Hightoll was third. Math Wizard was fourth in 151.23.
In a Hall of Fame career and one of the most respected horsemen that American thoroughbred racing has ever produced, Bill Mott has never won the Kentucky Derby. And the son of Tappan, Tacitus, is taking him there for the powerful international Juddmonte Farms Incorporated. Tacitus, hard-fought victory here today in the Wood Memorial.
Tacitus in front. Tax second on the inside as they come down to the line. Hightoll takes third late. It is Tacitus in the Wood Memorial.